Today, we're honored to welcome Paul Peters, Army veteran, best-selling author, host of On Purpose with Paul, and founder of several organizations dedicated to helping people discover their purpose and rebuild their lives. From serving in our military, thank you, to launching mentoring programs for at-risk youth, Paul's story is one of resilience, leadership, intentional living. You don't want to miss this conversation. Good morning, Paul.
Good morning, Ron.
Glad to have you with us.
Well, thank you. Very excited to be here.
Yes, you've served in the military, led ministries, written books, launched multiple businesses. What was a pivotal moment that helped you connect all those experiences into this unified purpose that you got?
Well, for me, if I could share, I grew up in a very challenging childhood, raised by a single mom. I'm the youngest of six. Right off from the gate, a situation where my mom was married to an alcoholic man who sought to, very abusive, not only to my mom, to many of us. And he had pursued my mom. She ran away. He pursued her and found her and proceeded to try to kill her, put 6 bullets in her. So the very beginning of my life started with a lot of trauma, a lot of tragedy that many folks, listeners, could probably relate to some degree. And my mom was in the hospital for a year. My dad ended up going to jail. Never saw him again. But that was what was handed to me. And so over the next 20 years, I basically tried to figure out what was it that I was called to do in my life. And any young man knows who's not had a father growing up understands the need and the definition of how a man defines a young man. And so part of that led to a lot of insecurity. Ultimately, in my teens, led to some drug usage, alcohol abuse, and ultimately in my early 20s, contemplation and attempt of suicide on my life because I could not find the answers, because I was pursuing it in the wrong direction, because I was trying to figure out why all of that happened to me, and I ended up becoming the victim. And it was during that time when I was contemplating suicide, call it a still voice, whatever you want to call it, but I didn't go through that attempted suicide. And I ended up reaching out to family. That was the long journey back for me to try to figure out why all of that tragedy occurred to me early in life. And the first 20 years, and then the next 20 years was that discovery. The last 20 years where I'm at currently is really about helping other people discover the story in their own life and discover their own purpose, because everything we go through, I believe, has already been predetermined per se, even though the tragedy, because we are allowed to go through those challenges in order to help other people who are going to go behind us within those challenges. And that's played out because for me, for example, growing up the youngest of 6 in an abusive relationship, my mom was a domestic violence victim. I'm at risk. So when you look at my nonprofit focuses on at-risk domestic violence victims. Most of my career has been working with folks with intellectual disability and mental health substance abuse. I believe my dad suffered with substance abuse and mental health issues. I was served 8 years in the military as an Army first lieutenant. And so all of those things that played out of my life in the first 20 to 25 years defined who I was so that I could then begin to help other people find their purpose. And like I said, I work with seniors because big part of my youth, I help volunteer with my brother, who's a minister in a nursing home, because one of what I call the underprivileged of the people who are forgotten, many of them are seniors who live their life and unfortunately are left aside to be able to be cherished as they should be. So those are some of the journeys, but I've got many more stories to share.
Wow. There's a lot to unpack there. One of them that I want to unpack with you is you were saying, as far as because I believe one of the biggest problems in our society is the fatherless home. And, I don't know, obviously, I grew up with 2 parents. My dad was very, very, very poor as a young person. And one of the things he said to me, or he taught us, was they didn't know they were poor because so was everybody else. And you growing up without a father, yet knowing that was missing, how did you know that was missing? So I want to talk about that when we come back. Continuing our conversation this morning, we are chatting with Paul Peters. If you missed the last segment, Paul gave us some background that is amazing. It's really quite a story that Paul's experienced in life. And Paul, I wanted to get to one of the questions I have for you, because I'm the host, so I get to ask the questions. It's all fun. My dad, I was mentioning in the last segment, my dad said that because of his situation, they didn't know what they didn't know. So they didn't know that they were poor. They thought everybody just got to share one can of beans for the whole family. Did you realize what was missing in your life when your dad wasn't there?
I did, actually. Like I said, I was the youngest of six. My mom was a single parent. She worked all the time just to put food on the table for us. And so I think as a young child, you just know there's something missing. Even though I grew up without the dad, I missed that dual parenting role. And with my mom working all the time, I was kind of parenting myself or being parented by my siblings. And so it was challenging. I was bullied as a young kid. I chose to sought relief, through alcohol and drugs in my teen years, which ultimately, anyone who has gone that path before never meets and fulfills the desires of what you want to meet that void in your life. So the first 20 years of my life, I was trying to get the answers to the questions I had. Why did this happen to me? And how do I relieve the pain?
Wow. So was the military the solution for you?
It was part of the
solution. Had you
solution.
straightened out your life before you went in the military?
No, it was part of the solution simply because I did not have that father figure and I knew I needed that discipline. So I got in there, which provided the structured discipline I needed, in certain decisions. But like I said, there was a missing void, missing spiritually, missing emotionally. And I did not have that father figure that, most young men and young girls need. And so that was just one component of how I sought the answer of getting into the military, but it was not the answer.
Gotcha. So, a lot of people, when they go through major life issues, they struggle trying to find out their why and what their mission is. What's your advice for someone who feels adrift right now, but knows they're meant for more?
Well, I would definitely, like for myself, a big component, you asked for a turning point in my life. And it really came spiritually for me when I had to confront my father, who had passed away when I was 11. I couldn't go back and deal with that issue because he was gone. I had to deal with what I was experiencing in way of the anger, the unforgiveness, and the unhealthy connection that led to my addiction because of that. And I had, in a way that was absolutely transforming for me. I had to forgive my father, even though he had passed away. I got to understand why my father did some of the things. Didn't excuse his behavior, but he grew up in an alcoholic family. He was abused. So it gave me a level of understanding and compassion I needed to let go of my anger and bitterness so that I could begin to heal and I could begin to grow as a human being and as a man.
Interesting. It's just fascinating when I get to talk to people and hear their stories, because, you're going through all that you went through at such a young age. There's a whole lot there. And then contemplating suicide, now taking that to the next level of being able to looking at to helping other people. Did you have to find help yet? It seems to me like you probably had to help yourself before you could go out to help others, don't you?
Exactly. I would break up my life pretty much in about 3 to 4 sections. The first section was dealing with the trauma. The second one was the journey to recovery. And then the third section was the discovery. How do I take what I experienced the first third of my life and the second third to then give back? And it was really, and I tell people, if you want to understand your purpose, sometimes you have to turn around and look at the journey that you've taken up to that moment. It will give you indications and clues as to what you're supposed to do. And that's what I discovered in myself. I looked at my life and I looked at the journey. I looked at the issue with the addiction. I looked at working with seniors, all of that, recognizing I could no longer play the victim, which I did in the first part of my life. I needed now to help other people who were following that same path. And so that's why I started the nonprofit. That's why I work in the field that I work. That's why I write the books, do the stories, so I can tell my story and give the ability to have others tell their story. Because in this storytelling is the discovery, part of the discovery of who you're supposed to be and your calling in your life.
So how did you get the financing and funding for doing all this? I mean, because you said you grew up very poor, and then you get into the drugs and alcohol, which certainly is not going to be a financially rewarding. Military is not going to give you, funding to go and do all this service that you do. How did you find that part of your mission?
Well, one of the things is I've been an entrepreneur since I was 6. I had to be self-sufficient because my mom worked all the time. She was just trying to feed us. So I started my paper route. I did lawns. I mean, I've been an entrepreneur as long as I can remember. Started my own company in my 30s, working in the state of North Carolina, work with folks with intellectual disability. And I started from one individual to serving over 700. So I pretty much do that. That funds a lot of my activities. But like I said, once I started that and serving, helping people within my staff, the individuals with disabilities find a sense of purpose. I've just expanded it to book writing and to TV as well.
That's a lot of people when you're serving. I mean, I know just from the families that we serve and we talk to and consult all the time. Serving 700 families is a big operation.
It is, but it's a true joy because look at it from a standpoint. I don't know if you have ever known or had somebody with this disability. I have my oldest has autism. I adopted him. When you take into consideration the what it entails to take care of a special needs child, let alone have a dream to do the things that you and I take for granted. It is such a calling, such a sense of purpose. And I've tried to instill that with my staff, that we have a God-given mission to be able to care for people who cannot necessarily do it on their own. So it gives us an opportunity to make a life, a dream possible for the folks that we get to support.
And that's probably the thing that makes it's a self-satisfying when you get to watch somebody, when you're able to help somebody meet their goals and their dreams. It kind of makes you feel, seems to me, at least in my world, I think one of the best things we ever do is give veterans keys to houses, right? Because we're in the lending world. So when you're talking about helping special needs individuals, watching them achieve their goals has got to be very, very fulfilling.
It is extremely fulfilling. None of us got to where we're at on our own. I'm a big proponent of mentoring. I started a mentoring center for the at-risk kids. We all got here because somebody cared enough to help us, to give keys to a veteran, to be able to help somebody who can't walk, be able to walk or to speak or to do the things that we can't do on our own. That's why it's so important we work together. We have a level of compassion to support those people in need, because eventually we're going to be in need. And if we share that kind of compassion and love, we're going to get a lot further in life, and the world's going to be a much better place.
Absolutely. We're going to continue our conversation with Paul Peters when we come back. Continue our conversation. Paul Peters is with us today. He's got a fascinating story that we've been learning about and going to learn a little bit more. So, Paul, you got this organization. Can you talk about
I'm sorry, Ron, I missed the question.
Some of the biggest challenges you've faced in building this organization and what keeps
some of the challenges I faced in building the organization. Was that the question?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I started in North Carolina. And so part of it is, when I started, we were doing a service called Community Navigation. And then basically building it one by one. I was the only employee owner for about 6 years. And I've grown to about over 300 staff. So just building something from the ground up has been the biggest challenge. But the driving force, in line with what helping others discover their purpose, if you believe in something and you have the passion and you have the skill, you can accomplish anything. And so what I've done is combine what I've taught in my book, or wrote in my book and taught on my TV show, is finding your purpose has everything to do with what you're passionate about, what you're skilled at, and what drives you each and every day. So I have a passion to help folks with disabilities. I have a passion to help folks with who are veterans, senior citizens. And so that's been my driving force. And so success is always going to be on the other side of that, because when you believe in something and you persevere, you will be successful. So that's been the driving force. And my company is looking to expand outside of North Carolina across the nation in the next 3 years. So we're just going to be building and creating something great across the nation.
Wow. And tell us the website for your company.
It's www.covenanttoserve.com. www.nehemiah.com. And my nonprofit is www.nehemiahprojectcovenantoflove.org.
So the idea of this, so does the nonprofit help fund the covenant business? How does that work?
No, the nonprofit is pretty much funded by donations and grants. We were able to get a grant through the opioid grant from North Carolina to help folks who are struggling with addiction and at-risk kids. And so some of that's funded that way. And it's primarily in North Carolina, but it's a global ministry. I'm also expanded into Central America through my foundation, doing very similar things, working with the folks that are in poverty in Guatemala and in Costa Rica.
So does the nonprofit take donations from our audience?
It does, yes.
Okay, so if you want to help out there, and I didn't catch the name of your book, so let's see. We didn't share that with our audience also.
Yeah, so I've got 4 books out. So the first one's called Discovering and Embracing Your Life Purpose, and then the second book was The Ways of Wisdom, and then the other book was Success Redefined that I co-authored with Jack Canfield from Success Redefined. I did a new edition or updated edition on the first book. And then I'm currently working on a fiction called The Inheritance, which is helping people discover their purpose, but it's in a fiction form about the main character named Jacob Steele.
Wow. Yeah, so you got a lot going on.
Yes.
So what impact do you hope that your work's going to have on the community or the industries?
Well, I'm one of those individuals, that the Bible basically says that, many are called, few are chosen. When you get that point in your life and you feel like you're following God's plan and purpose for your life, then you do it with passion, you do it with excitement. I don't know when my last day will be, but I want to make sure that I've lived it to the fullest. I want to make sure the message that I have, helping people find their purpose, coming together in a sense of unity to make a difference in our world, that is my main message. And I'm going to do it until my last breath.
Sounds like you're doing it to the fullest as well.
Yeah. There's no other way to live your life.
Give us one of your favorite. Yeah. So, I always I think that a lot of people learn a lot by stories. Give us a memorable story, a breakthrough moment in your career.
Breakthrough moment in my career. I absolutely love my kids. And so spending the time with my kids, I had to make a decision, with all the different pursuits that I made. I went through a pretty nasty divorce, and a lot of the time my kids growing up, I didn't get to spend the time with them. So I've taken basically quantity time and for quality time. And so taking that time with my kids to travel the world has been probably the greatest thrill. Also recently marrying my soulmate has been another experience. God has been very gracious and allowing me to find the woman that I'm going to spend the rest of my life with and who totally believes in what I'm doing. And we are just impacting people all over the globe. So.
That sounds wonderful. So what advice are you going to give somebody, or would you share with somebody that wants to get into to follow your path?
Well, I would tell them there's an interesting quote that I put in my book. It's by Mark Twain. The 2 most important days of your life are the days you were born, and the second is the day you discover why. I would encourage people, pursue what you feel called to do. I would ask the question, what am I called to do? And don't give up until you get the answer. Once you get the answer, I would go after it like never before, because what's going to end up happening is you're going to end up making more money than you thought possible. And you're going to love doing it because you're doing it for the right reason, to serve other people, not necessarily to earn a lot of money. And really at the end of our life, we want to be able to say we made an impact and we served our community and we gave back. And I think for me, that's all that matters. It's not the money I make. It's not the possessions. It's what impact did I make on this world while I lived in it.
I think it sounds to me like you've got a lot going on there, in the sense that impacting the world, but also remembering, changing. It sounds like you're working on changing something that, in my opinion, and the only opinion I can really share, is important, is, keep maintaining that role model figure, as being that father figure, and what I'm getting at.
Yeah, it was very important for me, even though my father was not a good role model. I had a choice to make when I had my two kids, because I have two, from my previous marriage, and then two I adopted. I could have chosen to be like my dad and had that continued cycle, abuse, neglect, but I chose not to do that because I knew what I wanted. I knew what was important to me, and I wasn't going to have my kids go through what I went through. So I took that time, because I became a parent later in life. I took that time. As I told you, my first part was the mess. Then it was trying to figure out what to do with the mess. And I had my kids in that middle to third section of my life. Not that I got everything figured out, but I figured the most important thing out, and that was to be a good, loving parent, father.
Model section of taking care of our kids. I have three of my own, and they're most important thing. And actually, I guess now most important thing. Now we've added two grandkids, so looking after them and being a good role model and teaching them the world, or at least the best we can do, is probably the best thing out there in my world as well. So yeah. Appreciate you coming on and sharing with us. We're going to put in our show notes the links to your websites, to your books, and hopefully we'll be able to get you back on when I'm not breaking up quite as much.